All right, what's up, Dadhood? I have an unbelievable guest on, Drew Manning, today in the studio. He was on the previous podcast, but now he's back. He's given his time to help educate y'all on what's going on, not only in his life, but what he's doing as a dad and all this exciting stuff. As we all know, Drew Manning has not only been featured on Good Morning America, on Dr. Oz, on The Late Show, also is a New York Times bestselling author for his book. You may know him as Fit to Fat to Fit, where Drew decided to put on 65 plus pounds because he was working with his clients and he wanted to have a better understanding of what they were going through. My friend, I can't even imagine what that was like, but welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, Thomas, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, we were chatting a little bit beforehand, but tell me, as far as like being a dad, you have your two daughters. What from the last time we talked, like what's new? What's happening in their lives and in yours?
Dude, so much has happened. My girls are teenagers pretty much right now. And I'll be honest with you, like this transition of like going from like innocent, cute little girls to becoming women as a single father for me has been really, really difficult. And I wasn't prepared for this phase of life where I'm like, wait a second, I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to the old version that like we had so much fun. So there's been like a lot of learning lessons and a lot of hard life lessons that I've had over the past couple of years, because once they've transitioned with, having their periods, everything changes. Everything changes. And so I've had a lot of struggles, to be honest with you, but it's taught me so much about, this phase of life. And it's really opened up my eyes to how important it is to do the work, the inner work, right, on yourself and show up for yourself, because you realize your kids don't need you as much anymore, and then you lose your sense of purpose, and you've created this identity of like, oh, I'm this person that provides this for my kids, and gives, and they need me, and now they don't, and so you kind of you go through like a little bit of an identity crisis, which I did. And now that I've kind of like come to terms with it, it's been a lot more peaceful with everything. But it's been hard. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, it's been very humbling.
Wow. You said something there that just like really hit home. You said you weren't able to really say goodbye to like the child version of your daughter. Like, can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. I saw a TikTok video actually recently, and I shared it, but it broke my heart because, yeah, like as parents, we will never get to have that version of them ever again, when they're, things are fun, and you're like, life is magical for them, and you are their hero. And we want to stay in that, and it's really, really difficult to let go of that. In the TikTok video, they talked about how, becoming a parent is kind of like going through a very, very slow breakup with your kid, because the ultimate goal of a parent is to teach their kid, life lessons, and, your wisdom you share with them, and then eventually they go away. And that right there is the ultimate goal. But as a parent, it breaks your heart, because it is like a slow breakup where slowly but surely they're going to be breaking up with you at some point. And that's kind of what the goal of parenthood is. But it's freaking difficult because you want to hold on to that version of them forever, right? Like daddy's little girl. And you can't, right? And that's just the way life is. And like coming to terms with that has been really, really hard, because you do kind of see like, hey, we are going through the slow breakup, and eventually you're going to be gone. And then it's like, okay, what do I, like, who am I now without this person needing me? It's like you've built this identity for so long. And that's why it's been really hard and humbling. And I think every parent out there, like, for the first 10 years, spend as much time as you can with your kids, even if like, you have to like sacrifice, money or wealth, because you will realize at the end of your life, at least I would assume you would, that you'll never regret spending more time with your kid, because like I said, that version of them will be gone eventually. And you'll wish you spent more time and cherish those moments so much more. So that's what I've learned so far.
Here, there's so much wisdom
Yeah.
behind that. My wife and I, we were walking the other day just talking about that very thing. Like, at what point do we sacrifice like the grind and versions of what society says success is for time and energy put towards the family, that no matter how much wealth I have at some point, I would never be able to buy a second of that back.
Yeah, it's so true. And so that's why I think learning to be a present parent
Mhm.
is so important, not just for like you as a parent, as a father. I think you as a human, learning to be present is all that we really have. We can't live in the past, right? We can't live in the future. Those don't exist really in the real time. We can only live in the here and now, and learn to be present means, putting your phone down, truly listening to your kid, getting on their level, listening to understand them, not listening to judge them and critique them. And like, it's hard. A lot of the work I do in my health and fitness journey with helping people is to learn to be present. Because when you're present, you can actually be in control of your life. But it's hard because our brains run on autopilot most of the time. We're running on the subconscious of what we've been taught and programmed to do, because our brains have, we've had so many experiences. We kind of go throughout our life calculating like, okay, like this is how we're supposed to respond to this situation. And you don't really think about it. You're not really conscious about it. You just do it. And then sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I think there's a study that showed that we only spend 5% of our time in the conscious mind and 95% of the time just on autopilot. Like, have you ever driven to work or somewhere and you don't even really remember, steering the car and turning the signal on? You could totally zone out, right? Like, that's what
Yeah.
I mean by being autopilot. It's like that movie Click with Adam Sandler, where he just fast forwards through his life to get to the promotion or the money. And then he realizes that, he was never truly present. And that's what I think the hard work is. Like, when I say do the inner work, is learning to be present, like a present parent, or just be present in your life. And that's where I think you can be so much more fulfilled and happy, versus when we're thinking about the past mistakes we made, or we're worrying about the future. It takes us out of the present moment, and you're not really truly living, at least in my opinion.
No, absolutely. What do you personally do? Because I mean, I struggle with this. I would say I'm such a forward thinker that I'm perpetually living in the what ifs almost situation, which most of the time never even comes to light, or where it's a lot easier or better, or sometimes, you can never predict it, right? When you were saying doing that inner work, do you have any examples of things that you've personally done to help you align more in the present?
Yeah, a lot of stuff. There's a lot. So I think a couple things are therapy, journaling, meditation, reading books. Like, I would say a couple of books that have helped me with this is the books by Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements, Mastery of Self, Mastery of Love. Those kind of books have really helped shift my mindset of letting go of, not attaching myself to the future. I think you do need to obviously plan for tomorrow. You can't just be like live day to day and like, I don't know what I'm going to do for work today, or what I'm going to do for, money today. I don't think that's the way you want to live your life. So there has to be a balance, obviously, right? We live in this world. We kind of have to play this game of like financial planning and planning for the future. Like, there's got to be a balance of that. But I think if you're doing that too much and you're not able to be present, like if you're with your kid and you're like, tuning out, you're on autopilot with them, they're trying to tell you a story and you're thinking about, oh, okay, I got to do my taxes, I got to do grocery shopping, I got to do laundry, I got to do all these things. You're missing out on the opportunity of connecting and bonding, and it's kind of pulling you out. But I think, there needs to be quality time spent with them where you are truly present, but then also maybe you make time for like, okay, I'm going to plan out for the future, but I'm going to do it when I'm not, like, it doesn't conflict with, an opportunity to bond with my family and build, strong relationships. So I think that's kind of for me how it's like how I've been able to navigate that, if that makes sense.
No, that totally does. And now that your daughters are, teens now, how are you able to try to balance like spending time with them when they are on their kind of their own path, as you'd mentioned, right?
It's been really, really hard. And this is like the journey, the work that I've had to do on myself is like letting go of forcing situations. Because in the past, when they were little, it's like, hey, let's go grocery shopping, let's go to the movie, let's take you guys to do all these things. And now 99% of the time they'll say no. And so like if I force it, like, hey, we're going to the beach, we're going to be spending time as a family, then they do it resentfully, and then like, it's just like not a good experience sometimes. So I'll keep inviting. I'll always put the invite out there, like, hey, I'm going to go walk across the street because I live here in Hawaii and watch the sunset. And 99.9% of the time they'll say no. But that 0.1% of the time where like something does happen, where they do want to talk to me or they do want to hang out with me, that's where you need to be truly present. Because if not, you're going to miss out on an opportunity. Because even though it sucks that they don't want to spend time with you as a parent, there is beauty still to be found in the journey, because there's those small moments of joy and fulfillment and true connection and bonding. And it doesn't happen all the time, but if you're not ready for it and you're not able to be present during it, you miss out on those small, because like they're going to become smaller and smaller. And then like, once they move out, they're going to move out, go to college, maybe get married one day and, build a family of their own. Then those opportunities are going to be even less and less. And so right now it's like, okay, you guys can have your freedom, do your thing. I'll leave you alone. Cause that's the thing. It's like when I try and talk to them sometimes, that like, if I force it and like make them try and kind of like have a conversation with me, that pulls them away. It distances them. And so I've really had to let go of control. And this is like the hard part. So any dads out there that are like trying to force this, letting go of control is really hard. It's hard to surrender. And that's where all like this inner work that I've talked about, like therapy, meditation, journaling, even things like breath work, have really helped me let go of control and surrender to what is, instead of trying to force it and then being upset that it didn't happen the way I wanted it to. And I think that's where I've had to let go of like trying to control the uncontrollable. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because our egos want to be in control. It feels safe to us to control but it just gives us anxiety. That's the thing you realize is you're not in control. And the harder you try to control the uncontrollable, the more anxiety, the more worry that you end up with.
Oh man, it's so difficult to surrender to
Right.
moments like that. And something you just said there, when you're allowing space, that when your daughters want to engage or interact with you, then really honing in on that moment. And I think that's where it becomes very difficult, because we want to have control. We want to say, well, I'm going to do this. I've invited you X amount of times and you've not wanted to hang out with me. And now maybe I'm in the middle of work, or I'm in the middle of all these other things that are going on in our life. And now you want my attention, and I've got to like drop it all to give it back to you. But then, if to your point, if you don't in that moment and you don't acknowledge that this moment is present and you miss it, then you don't have anything. It's like you don't have any moments, right?
It's really hard because it almost comes across as like super selfish on their end, and they are selfish, right? And they're ungrateful and unappreciative a lot of times. And it's really hard to be like, well, if you're going to do that to me, then I'm going to do this to you, right? That this is why it's so important to do the work, because our inner child wounds come out and we're triggered because we haven't healed those inner child wounds of love that we needed when we were kids. And this is why, like in my journey, I've learned about something called inner child work, where you connect to that little boy, as a man, you connect to that little inner child that I think is still within all of us, that maybe didn't receive the love that we needed from our parents. And so when our kids act out in a certain way, that inner child wound is activated and triggered. And like, yeah, it's so easy to be like, well, you didn't talk to me, so I'm not going to talk to you. And like, it's like we're going back to being a kid. And I really do think all of us adults are just still hurt little kids inside, throwing tantrums, but as an adult, right? It looks different. And so, this is why it's so important to do something called inner child work, where you show up for yourself, where you become the parent that you needed as a kid, that maybe your parents just didn't know how to do or show up for you, so that, those wounds aren't activated. There's a really good quote that I love. It says, if you don't heal what hurt you, you're going to bleed on those who didn't cut you. And that to me means your kids. You're going to bleed on those who, like, your kids are innocent. It's not their fault of all the hurt that you've been through your life, and it's not your fault either. It's not your fault for what's happened to you. But at some point, you're gonna have to take responsibility to heal what hurt you. Otherwise, you're gonna bleed on your kids and those who didn't cut you. They're innocent, and that's why, like, this tattoo that I have, it says "break the cycle." It's about breaking generational cycles of trauma. If we don't want to pass that on to our kids, the same patterns, the same unhealthy, the same unhealthy behaviors, if we don't break the cycle. And that's what is so hard. It's so hard to do the work to break that cycle, because then it's like, okay, I want to react this way when they do this. But then my higher self, like the work that I'm doing on myself, helps me realize that, okay, that's probably not the healthiest reaction to have, even though I want to react that way. But if I don't work on myself and, pause before reacting and thought and think it through before I react, then I'm just passing on those generational cycles of trauma that, haven't been broken yet. And it's up to me to be the cycle breaker in my family. And it's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of work. Like every day is a conscious choice to show up your best self in every moment and be as present as possible and be conscious and aware of like what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it's up to us to, at some point break that cycle. But it's like working out, right? Like working out is one of those things that people know they're supposed to do, but it's not like you do it for 90 days and get shredded and then you're done. It's like, it's an ongoing thing. Every single day is a battle of like, okay, do I choose the cake and ice cream, or do I choose the chicken and broccoli? Do I choose to sit on the couch, Netflix and chill, or do I go move my body, exercise? Like every day is a conscious choice to, to work towards that better version of yourself. But yeah, it's hard. I'm not gonna lie. And so my heart goes out to all you, dads out there that might be struggling. And I hear you, I see you. Like I know how hard it is.
Dude, come on, people. Listen to this episode. Like, if you just rewind that for a second and listen, there's so much value in that, Drew. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, my friend. Like that whole breaking the cycle, like it has to be, though. We have to, as dads, say, what happens, and we're going to go through the dark and we got to face it. We got to figure out what works for us. Like you said, it's like meditation, therapy, breath work, inner child work, all like do it all. Like there's not like this one size fits all, like try it all out and putting in that time, because what to change that cycle, like makes our children better and have a better experience than we have. Like, and if that's like, I'm hoping the majority of dads' goals out there to create a better life for our children. And it's not just monetary, people. Like, it's so much deeper.
Yeah, our kids need more than just, good financial, life. There's so much more to showing up for them in other ways. And there's a quote that I love by Rumi. He says, "The cure for pain is in the pain." And I think a lot of us as, older adults now, we have been taught to kind of escape our pain and numb the pain or distract ourselves from the pain. So like we have these inner child wounds, and it's so much easier to, suppress those emotions and those negative feelings by, alcohol, food, or drugs, or sex, or porn, or even like exercise or religion. Sometimes we will suppress the work that we're supposed to do by numbing out on different types of outlets, right? Or substances that kind of do that temporarily. But until you realize that the cure for pain is in the pain, meaning turn towards it, face the pain, face the fear, let it be uncomfortable, let it suck, let it be hard. But that's where the work needs to be done, to let that pain teach you something so that you can break that cycle. And then you can become the best version of yourself to show up for you, for your kids, for your family, and break that cycle. And that's kind of where I think we have it backwards, because it's so much easier to eat the cake and ice cream, to drink the alcohol, to sit on the couch and veg out, than it is to do the hard work and go to therapy and meditate and do the inner child work and exercise and eat healthy and all the things that we're talking about. Because it is work. And then we are creatures of comfort, and we seek comfort, right? We're hardwired to seek comfort. And that's why it's so hard for people to lose weight, right? Or maintain a healthy lifestyle, because it's like, oh, I have to exercise today, or I have to eat healthy food. You don't have to, right? But if you realize that you're worth it, your kids are worth it, then you look at it as you get to do the work, and you start to fall in love with the process when you fall in love with yourself, and you realize that you're worth it and your kids are worth it. Then the process doesn't seem like a chore. Then the process is more manageable and easier. You're like, oh, it feels good to get 8 hours of sleep, and it feels good to meditate, and it feels good to eat healthy food, and it feels good to exercise. Not in the moment, maybe. In the moment, it can be uncomfortable. In the moment, it can suck, because we're like, yeah, compared to the comfortable life, in the moment, it does suck and it is hard. But in the long run, it's a fact that you will feel better when you take care of yourself, your physical health and your mental health. And you realize that you're doing this, for you, right? The inner child version of you as well, but then also your kids. And that's where the motivation needs to come from at some point. But I think a lot of people struggle because they feel unworthy. And when they feel unworthy, it's like, well, I'm already a failure. I'm already 50 pounds overweight. I've already given up on myself. So what's the point? Right. And that's where people fall into this vicious cycle of like, okay, I'm going to do Drew's plan for 30 days and try and lose weight. But maybe they're sore and they are working 2 jobs and they're tired and they're exhausted. And they're like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. Right. And we seek comfort. We're like, well, it'd be more comfortable to, eat the cake and ice cream and, sleep in and do all those things. And I think there's a time and place to seek comfort, but this is where we need to realize that if we can train our brains to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations, that's where the real change will happen. That's where the lifestyle will happen. But we got to train our brains to become comfortable in these uncomfortable situations so that the growth will happen.
There's so much truth in that. Like, people ask me, man, why do you get in the ice bath, or why do you do these things? And it's like, because you're saying, I don't have to go do this right now. Like, matter of fact, I'm very comfortable, these nice air conditioned homes or, heated environments, and everything's all about comfort, comfort, comfort. So it's like, if you force yourself into an uncomfortable situation, but you realize you're okay, then when things come up like they always do in life, it becomes a little less taxing maybe on you.
Yeah. Amen. So true, man. And I think ice bath is a great way to train your brain, or even just a cold shower. It's a great way to train your brain to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. Or just sometimes I'll have my clients do what I call a sit still challenge, where it's not really meditation, but you find a comfortable position that you sit in, start with 5 minutes, and try not to move a muscle or scratch an itch or readjust your shoulders or your neck, and just see if you can go for 5 minutes. And you sit there without anything and you try and sit still. You realize 5 minutes is freaking hard. And I've trained myself and other people to do it for 30 minutes, where you literally don't move a muscle, even if a fly lands on you. And that right there is another way to train your brain to become comfortable in an uncomfortable situation, because you want to react, right? And this helps you slow down and realize that you're in control and not react. And so the next time your kid does something like spills the milk, instead of yelling at them and shaming them and saying, you should have been more careful, and like, it was just an accident. But like we kind of, I've done that before, where I've lost my temper over something that was an accident. And I think, if you can learn to control your reactions in life, you'll probably have a more peaceful life. Because if you just go off your reactions, off autopilot, the way you've been programmed, the way your parents programmed you, you'll probably have a lot of these cycles that are unhealthy, that you realize that, oh shoot, I'm pass that on to my kids. Right. So anyways, I love the ice bath idea.
That's so funny, because it's like, I do that too. And I'm like, oh, that wasn't a reaction I actually wanted to give to my kids. That was my 8-year-old version that had that happen to him. And it's just like that, again, going back to your point, that cycle. And it's like, that's so fascinating. I love that stuff. So, because you have dedicated so much time of your life and energy into the physical aspects, not only for yourself, but for your clients, and now you're diving into like really I would almost say the more challenging aspects. It's like diving into the self, right? When you have noticed like some of these trainings, Are you finding it harder, maybe on your from a personal level, to build those inner muscles than it is to build the external muscles?
Dude, I'll work out twice a day easier than it is to do the inner work, because the inner work for me is something that's so difficult, because it's like I said, we're on autopilot a lot of the times. We're unconscious going throughout the day, and to be conscious and aware is mentally exhausting. Like, it really is, to be present in the moment and like stop your reactions, take a few deep breaths, and like those patterns and habits. It's so easy to go to the gym and just zone out and do some curls and do some workouts. Like, that for me is easy because I've done it for so long. But this, doing the inner work for people, I think, is the struggle, because there's no like, there's no like programs that we're so used to, like, oh yeah, the 30-day get shredded program. Like, if I do keto and, eat low carb, I'll look like this. Versus doing the inner work, it could look different for each person. Like I said, sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's religion and prayer, sometimes it's meditation, sometimes it's, for some people, like breath work or plant medicines, things like that, that kind of help you face the pain, right? Like I said, turn towards the pain and learn something about yourself. To become self-aware is really the key to overcoming patterns and habits and addictions. Because there's a quote I love by Anthony DeMello, who says, what you're aware of, you're in control of, and what you're not aware of is in control of you. Mm-hmm. And so as you become aware, you become more in control of how you react and respond. But if you're not even aware of why you do what you do, then you're just on autopilot all the time until you start to become aware of, like, oh, I see now, when I was a kid, my parents did this to me, and so it forced me to react this way. And so now I've just been, going through my life, reacting this way, but not really realizing what I was doing or why I was doing it. And now that I'm older, I'm more aware of why I'm doing it. I know what my triggers are now. And instead of just reacting to those triggers like I normally do, maybe I can pause and create a space between stimulus and response. And the longer that space right there is where you take your power back. And to create that space is difficult to do, but it's possible. And that's where the inner work needs to happen, to create space between stimulus and response. And like I said, that's where you get your power back. And yeah, man, physical, uncomfortable like work is for me a lot easier than it is to do the inner work.
For sure. No, I agree with you 100% on that one. Have you noticed while doing a lot of this inner work, though, you tend to have more empathy for others, like in your clients, especially?
Yeah, I think, that all started. Well, I have more empathy for myself first and foremost, which then helps me empathize with other people. Because once I started doing the inner work on myself, I realized why I was the way I was and why I did what I did. And I started to have compassion and empathy. I'm like, oh, I understand myself on a deeper level. And this is why the book, The Four Agreements, is really good, because everything's a mirror of how we see ourselves. And so if you can have empathy for yourself and your inner child, and you can have love for yourself, then it's so much easier to empathize and have love for other people. And that's where we learn to break the cycle. That means we can empathize with our spouses, with our kids, with random strangers. And you see everything as a reflection of how you see yourself. And then you realize everyone else, the way they treat you and other people, is a reflection of how they see themselves. Because if someone hates themselves and is judgmental towards themselves and beats themselves up, guess what? They're going to mirror that and reflect that on every single person that they probably interact with, especially their kids. So, yeah. But it also came from doing Fit to Fat to Fit. That really helped me empathize with people who are overweight. Because before, I'm like, why is it so hard for people just to do the work? Like, you just do it. Like, you eat healthy, you exercise. Like, why do people struggle with that? And once I did Fit to Fat to Fit the first time, and I was truly humbled and saw how powerful the emotional connection to food really is. And this is why, doing physical work, like working out and diet and exercise, is so dependent, in my opinion, on doing the inner work, right? Because your ability to show up and do the physical stuff is determined by your mental and emotional states. So if you're sad, lonely, depressed, you have these traumas and challenges that you haven't really dealt with, Well, when you try and do like a 30-day, healthy challenge where you eat healthy food and you exercise, what happens is those emotional challenges and triggers still come up. And when you are triggered with those, past traumas and challenges, then your ability to eat the chicken and broccoli versus the cake and ice cream is going to be a lot harder, because you're like, well, I'm feeling sad today, or I got in a fight with my spouse, or my kids are driving me crazy. So, if I reach for this food, it's going to make me temporarily feel better. Your brain knows that. And it gives you the dopamine spike, which feels good. It's the pleasure center of our brain. It lights up when you eat cake or ice cream or alcohol or like some kind of escape, right? Your brain knows that. So you feel better temporarily. And that's why people struggle to live a healthy lifestyle, is because their mental and emotional state, they're constantly triggered, or they have these inner wounds that they haven't healed yet. And it's so much easier to escape and numb and distract with unhealthy, comfortable lifestyle decisions, or outlets, than it is to, deal with it, face it, and then turn towards doing something uncomfortable in the moment. So yeah, a lot of it stemmed from doing Fit Twice, but also doing the inner work on myself. And I think if you could have empathy for yourself, it's going to be easier to have empathy for others.
So you said you did it twice, and now I know this because last time we like chatted, I think you were about to kick off your second one, and
Yeah.
like tell me about that one, because that was a whole different stage of life, man.
Yeah. The first time I did it was in 2011, 2012. And I was married at the time. My kids were really little. They were like 2 years old and a newborn. And this time, fast forward to 2020, I was almost 40. My kids were 9 and 11. I was divorced, but in a relationship. So I had a girlfriend. And I thought it was going to be easy. I thought, I was like, oh, yeah, I've done this before. I know what to expect. Like, I got this. It'll be not that hard, right? Obviously, I was truly humbled again, and went through a really hard breakup, actually, in the middle of my weight gain phase with my girlfriend, which had nothing to do with the journey. It just, our own issues kind of came up after being in a relationship for 2 years. And so that humbled me, broke me down. And that was really difficult, to be 60 pounds overweight, going through a really hard breakup that was, as you can imagine, emotionally, kind of traumatizing or hard or difficult. But then I had to show up on camera and do all the things, and eat the food. And yeah, it taught me a lot about emotional eating and why people get stuck in these vicious cycles of going through hard life challenges and turning towards food as a way to escape, or alcohol or drugs or whatever the escape is for people. I don't judge. We all escape in our own way. Some escapes are healthier than others, and some are a lot less healthier. And food is one of those things where it's like the ultimate drug, because it's legal, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like heroin or cocaine where you can, have to go find it somewhere, right? You can just go to Walmart and get all this food. So, or DoorDash it to your door. You don't have to move a muscle, right? Yeah, it really taught me a lot about the power of emotional eating, and but then also, being humbled. That's where, like, when difficult things happen in life, it's tempting to stay in that victim mindset of like life is happening to you, right? And you kind of blame God, you blame the universe, you blame your parents, you blame yourself, whatever. You blame a lot of things. But if you look at life happening for you instead of to you, you realize, like, okay, this thing's happening right now to me, right? But maybe if I reframe my mindset, I can look at it as happening for me. Meaning, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? How can I continue to work on myself to break the cycle and become the best version of myself? And I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, we need to go through hard times so that we have that adversity, so that we can get uncomfortable and grow, in a forced kind of way. And you have the option, you have the choice to choose life happening for you versus life happening to you. And so, yeah, the second journey was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I made it through, luckily, as a 40-year-old, because I wanted to show people in their 40s, like, yeah, it's harder, but it's still possible, right? It's still possible to take care of our bodies in a healthy way, even though it might be a little bit harder because you're more set in your ways, your metabolism might be slower, or your hormones might have changed. it's still possible. And that's why I did it a second time.
When you were going through that and you're on you already gained the weight or your set weight for the challenge and you're going back the other way. Um,
Yeah.
do you like at what point, or would you say like, is there a time frame in that you start feeling again almost the same dopamine rush as having the negative food? You start feeling that again towards that healthier lifestyle?
Um, Not really. It's not the same thing, right? Like
Mm,
eating chicken and broccoli will not give you the same dopamine spike as it would with like, cake and ice cream. Like it's individual. It's very individual, but you realize you do get a dopamine spike and from similar things like working out. The reason it's so good for not just your physical body but for your mental health is because what it does chemically to your brain, where your brain releases all these endorphins, and in the moment it sucks. Like in the moment you're like breathing heavy, you're sweating, your muscles are sore and tired, but afterwards you feel this sense of achievement and accomplishment, and you do feel physically better. And this is why movement is medicine. So you don't, that's the thing. Like when it comes to living a healthy lifestyle physically, people think, oh, I need to go to the gym for 60 minutes and lift weights and do cardio. Sure, if you're looking to get a specific look. But if you're working out more for your mental health, then any kind of movement is medicine, whether it's walking or dancing or surfing or biking or swimming or yoga or Pilates. Like it doesn't need to be this hardcore thing where it's like, okay, go to the gym, which doesn't appeal to some people, like unless they want like that specific look that they're going for. But any kind of movement is medicine. I just posted today on my social media, it's Mental Health Awareness Month, of why movement is so important. Movement and exercise has been shown to be more effective than antidepressants. And I'm not trying to say exercise will cure your depression or get rid of it, but it definitely helps it a lot more than you think it does. And so even though you don't feel like moving or motivated to move your body, it doesn't have to be this hardcore thing where it's like go to the gym. It could just be going for a walk, or like I said, dancing or doing yoga or whatever it looks like for you, or surfing. Any kind of movement will yes, it's good for your physical body because you're burning calories, but it's also great for your mental health as well.
that's so good. That's so good for the dads out there. Like, look, to Drew's
Yeah,
point, like you don't have to go to the gym and crank it out every day. Like maybe
yeah,
you're the dude that just puts on Alexa or some music and you just start jamming out, like jam out, dance, be silly, whatever, have fun with it. Because
yeah,
I think also like we forget as adults, especially men, we have a lot of like, we hold a lot in. It's okay
yeah,
for y'all to smile and laugh and have a good time. Like it is okay. Not that you need my permission, but like it's just one of those things that's like, let's not forget that, you know? Everything doesn't have to be the grind all the time.
yeah. And that's part of the inner child work, right? Like as a kid, you didn't care, what people thought of you, or if you look silly or you look stupid. At some point, we were indoctrinated and kind of domesticated into like, oh, I got to look a certain way when I dance. And so, like, but when you're a kid, you're just silly and you dance because it feels good and you love it. Tapping into that every once in a while, it doesn't mean you need to do it in front of everyone or all the time, but like being silly, being a kid again is something we've lost the
Mhm.
art of as we get older. Because we're like, oh, men don't do that. Like men are supposed to be like this. It's like, okay, yes, sure. Most of the time, you need to be that way. But if you lose connection with that inner child, life is less fun. Life was more fun as a kid. I'm sure we all can agree on that. Like going back to
Mhm.
being a kid and having no worries about life and not paying bills and just like being present in the moment and like being at one with our bodies and loving ourselves. Versus now, like we realize that yeah, we probably were a lot happier back then. So tapping into that every once in a while, I think is really important to do the inner child work, like I've talked about on this podcast.
Mhm. I really, man, I'm loving this. We're gonna switch it a little bit here. We're gonna play the old dad deck. So
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna
do it
pull a card here. You just tell me when to stop.
right there.
Okay, gonna go with this guy right here. Oh, this love this one. What moment in your dadhood has brought you the most joy?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, there's been so many. I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, looking back at when my girls were, you know, younger, I would say were my most happiest days because they really saw me as like this hero, and they saw me as like this person that they looked up to, and we had a great relationship back then. And I think those were probably my most joyful moments, was when I could show them, or when they showed me unconditional love, and I was able to show them unconditional love. Those have been my most joyous moments, and being truly present with them, and just like giving them love and them giving me love, whether it's watching a movie together and cuddling, or whether like on their birthdays, like daddy daughter dates are like the funnest thing for me. Those have been my most joyous moments as a dad. And like I said, every once in a while it'll happen. Now it's a miracle when it happens, but I truly cherish those small moments.
Drew, this episode has been so amazing. Your insights are just so great. One final question:
Sure.
if there was a message today that you could just like share with your daughters that would like stick with them for the rest of their lives, like what would that be?
That they continue to realize that they are lovable as they are, that they're worthy of love. Because I think everything stems from that. And I think if they grow up with that self love and they realize that they're worthy of love, then they'll realize, what's for them and what's not for them. And they'll be able to set better boundaries than I ever could have as a kid. And that's the thing that I would want to instill in them, is that ability to have empathy and self love for themselves, because I think that will make them more fulfilled throughout this life and will make them want to see other people from that lens. And so that's my hope, is if nothing else, that's what I've taught them, is to learn how to love themselves, and realize that they're worthy of love.
Wow. Dadhood, if you haven't recognized it up to this point, I don't know what to tell you, but Drew has so much insight. He's put in so much work, not only from the physical realm, but the emotional, spiritual, mental realm as well. Drew, if the listeners, and I say if, because there's going to be so many, but the listeners want to follow you, they want to connect with you, like what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, right now it's super simple. All of it is just fit to fat to fit with the number 2 in between. So that's FIT number 2, FAT number 2, FIT. It's all my social media handles and my website. They can just find me on there and reach out to me whenever. So I appreciate you having me on, Thomas. And yeah, I hope all the dads out there will continue to do the inner work and show up for themselves, so that they can be their best self for themselves and for their kids. And maybe we all can make a difference in this world by breaking the cycles that no longer serve us.
Well said, brother. Thank you so much for jumping on the show.
Thanks, Thomas. Have a good one, guys.